What happened down here, Trooper?
General, there's something down here with us. And it's not Seppi's.
The Zillo Beast, and the Zillo Beast strikes back. This was one of the most bizarre story meetings I've ever had with George. We go in there to get these ideas, and George was doing a lot of genre pictures in season 2. We had kind of a body snatchers episode, we had zombies episode, we had the murder mysteries, and out of nowhere, he hits me with this, let's face it, it's Godzilla. I've talked about Godzilla every now and then. I have a big Godzilla poster in my office. I used to watch the original Godzilla every Thanksgiving at my grandparents' house. I did a research paper where I used him as a Jungian archetype of social unconsciousness. So I'm thinking, on one hand, I'm thinking cool, and on the other, I'm thinking this is a production nightmare.
George is the master. He'll pitch out these ideas, these absolute grand visions, and when he does it, you certainly don't have the feeling that he's throwing it out there to see if you can do it. He's basically throwing it out there expecting you to figure out how to do it. And the analogy is not unlike jumping off a cliff and trying to figure out what we're gonna do before we land.
There's many things to consider when you're doing a Godzilla movie. Basically, you're doing something else and you blow something up. You drop a bomb, you cause a rift. You basically mess with nature. And then, boom, something else happens, which adds a little bit of mystery, and you think, wow, look at this giant chasm. I hope there is not something worse inside there.
I have a bad feeling about this.
You're like, oh my gosh, a terrifyingly giant monster. Then there's a monster, and these people want you to destroy the monster, other people don't want you to destroy the monster. These are the beats. This is how it goes. Because of my respect and appreciation for Godzilla, I really didn't want to go anywhere near Godzilla as far as a look was concerned.
This is pretty much the pose of the sketch that Dave gave me. I just fleshed it out, put scales on it, put spikes on it. As I was doing my research, I would look at pictures of lizards and earthworms, try to see how I could recombine all those things and to create this creature to match the feeling that we wanted of it being kind of worm-like. So the appendages have kind of no bones in them, which is why they can move in any direction wrapping around a building. There's no problem for it because it can just move the fingers both ways. Even the separate little spikes on the tail can move different directions. Just a lot of repeatable shapes.
There were concept paintings done by Randy Bantog and Tang Li that sort of show Anakin running up the side of effectively a building. This thing was so big that if you were running on the arm, the head would be so far away that it could practically be a painting.
So we had designs where we have our normal texture like we'd usually see on our designs, which would hold up normally. But then to put him next to a clone, we needed to design the Zillo to hold up at different resolutions. We knew that we would have to go in and do higher detail.
There are shots where Yoda and Ayla are actually jumping right across its eye. You get pretty much 2 feet away from this thing, and it all had to hold up when it was very close to camera.
Chris Bastianic, who modeled the Zillo Beast, went in and did we call normal maps. You can kind of see with the difference. Without a normal map, this is how it would hold up regularly, but if we add our normal maps, instantly, this level of detail. So when we actually see the Zillo up close in these shots, when Mace and Anakin are right up against his eye, you can see every little crack and every little detail in the Zillo.
This was sort of like all of the challenges that would come with the Jedi Cruiser and a new creature and a new character and a landscape rolled into one as it moved through other landscapes covered in effects. From the get-go, this was always going to be one of the toughest storylines to pull off.
The latest task by Dave and George was to create a giant 50s monster movie caliber creature sound. I went with the classic air horn, pitched way down, and processed, so we have this. We used a couple different horse pieces, added in a pitched down walrus. And then you combine that with a little bobcat growl. And you get a really upset Zillo Beast.
The Zillo Beast is discovered on the planet Malastare. Malastare is where the Dugs are from, which is the race that Sebulba is a member of. All of the Dugs were designed in a similar sort of approach that we had taken to the Weequay Pirates in Season 1, where you sort of design one or two basic bodies and then you dress them with different sort of layers of armor or different paint schemes. The only one that had an original one-off face was the King.
So this would be an example of taking an existing design and fitting it for our show and seeing how much detail you can knock off of it to make it more simplified. If you remember Sebulba from episode 1, this guy right here, the mouth is pretty round and there's a lot of bumps leading towards the lips as well as on the nose. So I took away all of that stuff and made it a nice square to be more graphic and more simplified and easier to read.
Sebulba was a CG creature who had a lot more fidelity in a live action film. So how do we keep it graphic and stylized but still have that weight? He's walking on his hands more or less anatomically. So once that hand plants, seeing that shoulder push up was going to be like one of the more important things to sell the weight of the character. A lot of the times when they're standing and gesturing through their dialogue, you want to see that weight shift like you would if someone's just readjusting their feet and turning to speak. They're doing it with their hands, so seeing it moving over and then, what are you talking about?
If you want us to sign your treaty, then you must help us destroy the beast.
We cannot allow the destruction of an innocent life form.
They come up with this way of, well, all right, well, we're not going to kill it, but we're going to deceive the Dugs into thinking we killed it, and then we'll transport it out of here.
The Dugs would never know the difference.
You're so moral, you're doing some things that are a little immoral. I think it shows really more of where the Jedi are at in terms of the whole conflict and the war. The moral ground that they held so firm to is changing.
That may be the only way we shall get this treaty signed and rest Master Windu's conscience.
Unfortunately, I have to subdue the Zillo Beast really fast. We have these tanks that are like electric shooting tanks.
Fire!
They're the most convenient to show up things we've ever had in the Clone Wars because they look just like giant monster tanks from Godzilla called Maser tanks. That's what they're based on. And I found it funny that, of course they had these things. We've never seen them before, but now we have them just in time to fight a giant monster. They are in Attack of the Clones. They just look a little different, and I have them redesigned to look a little more Godzilla-like for our purposes.
I came up with a couple of different versions initially, but we ended up actually combining this turret with this body. And Dave wanted this artwork for the driver's cab, which, it's like nose art on an aircraft.
It's a little Zillo Beast getting shocked. And everyone's like, why would they have that on there already? I was like, because they had a Sharpie and they drew it on their tank. I was like, come on. What do you think these guys are doing up until... Everybody's so serious all the time.
This isn't working!
I've had a fun time with the clones lately, pointing out the absurdity of some of the Jedi tactics.
Whose bright idea was this, anyway?
Evidently, those two have watched a lot of Godzilla movies. They know this is a bad strategy. Every time these monsters show up, you make us go out there with the tanks. It never works. Why are we doing this? In part 2, also, I thought it was hilarious. Stu staged these poor clones down on the bottom of the ramp and outside the hangar. They've got rifles.
If that creature's as powerful as they say, what good are these rifles gonna be?
Oops. Too bad. I guess you shouldn't have been standing in front of the giant doors with the monster on the other side. But survival of the fittest, even in the clone army, I say.
The beast has been loaded onto the transport. Have you selected a planet for relocation?
There has been a slight change of plans.
When George pitched this idea of doing this giant monster, we all thought one thing in common. We all thought, wow, I'm so glad this isn't on Coruscant, because that would be really hard. And we probably can't do that. And George says, yeah, so at the end of this, they're gonna take it on a ship back to Coruscant, like King Kong. And I was just like, of course.
Of course, you're gonna take the beast to Coruscant. Why? Well, because that's the best place to take it.
The Zillo Beast originally would have not fit inside a Jedi cruiser, but once it got scaled down, it actually fits inside the assault ship, which means it's probably about 20 stories high. Smaller than it used to be, but still giant. The staging area that you see in episode 3, where the Jedi cruisers sort of get ready to take off, it's where Anakin and Obi-Wan have their last conversation as friends before Anakin takes off for Mustafar. was where the Zillo Beast first arrives in Coruscant. There's a new piece of sort of lab geometry that was built. It's a Randy Bantog design. It's based very much on a sort of Zeppelin airship hangar.
I had those based on a hangar not far from here, down towards San Jose. I love basing stuff on a reality like that. And, you know, it's always my thought that, you know, you got a kid driving somewhere on a family trip or whatnot, and he looks out the window and, you know, he thinks, oh, it's a Zillo Beast hangar, you know.
They bring the Zillo Beast into this lab. They hook it up to this sort of restraint system and a bunch of girders, because that's, you know, you have to do that. It's a giant monster film. And because it is another one of those sort of tried and true monster movie formulas, there's a well-meaning scientist. It's always odd that the well-meaning scientist doesn't seem to be doing anything to end world hunger or, you know, find a cure for the common cold. In all these movies, a well-meaning scientist is always working on a death ray or a killer robot or something, but they're well-meaning. Dr. Bowl was a design by Randy Bantog as well. She looks somewhat similar to Nadar Veb, the Mon Calamari that appeared in Lair of Grievous, but she's not the same species. They just have similar coloration and sort of big yellow eyes.
Design-wise, when the eyes are very separate from, you know, any sense of brow or the mouth, it's hard to keep that personality unified, because a lot of who we are is acting through the eyes. Dr. Ball is the scientist, and even in the read, it's very analytical. It's almost like a robot. It's like, yes, yes, master, I will do this, you know, ba-ba-ba.
Its scales are remarkably strong and light. If we could examine their composition, we might be able to synthesize them to reinforce our clone armor.
I talked to the animators and I wanted them to concentrate on, like, okay, when is that moment where we first see the feelings underneath kind of break through? Her shoulders just subtly relax, and she might just start to blink a little bit more and look down and gather her thoughts before delivering her line. It's not always like, you know, point A, point B, I've got to do this. It's, oh, really? Okay, sure.
I believe it's now strong enough to kill the Zillo Beast, if that's still how you wish to proceed.
What sort of makes this work is that the Zillo Beast is not completely unintelligent. It's not just a giant rampaging monster. It has an agenda.
I find that hard to believe. It is, after all, just an animal.
It didn't seem to like your comment.
Seeing just the eye of the Zillo and echoing that, you know, he does actually feel something for Palpatine, and you see it in his eye.
Exactly what the Zillo Beast is planning to do once it finds Palpatine, I'm not sure if it's revenge or if he's just going to eat him.
Trap the monster, you have him chained up. Something antagonizes the monster. Bang, it breaks loose. Oh my gosh.
No, it should have been enough.
Zillo Beast, loose on Coruscant. Monsters, people are running around, crazy hysteria going on. He sees a video screen, follows Palpatine to the Senate, catches the plane before it goes off. I mean, a giant monster in the Star Wars universe isn't that absurd, I have to say. When you've got Rancors running around and, you know, Aowas and all kinds of different creatures, is a Zillo Beast really, wow, I've never seen something. Probably not on Coruscant.
Once the Zillo Beast actually starts breaking things, there's a couple of new buildings that were built just for that sort of sequence of destruction. There's a few shots from the inside of the new apartment building where people seem to be having a business meeting and the Zillo Beast's head sort of comes into frame and they all panic and run away. But probably most noticeably the Senate Dome, which we've seen from the very beginning in the series, but in this instance we were going to be right down on the surface of the dome. So that involved building a newer, much more detailed, higher res section of that dome.
And I'm very pleased that when you're looking at Coruscant in those shots, you feel like it is that city you see in the movies. You see the Zillo Beast running through. And when he dies at the end, I think it's appropriately sad.
You see this huge hulking creature, and how do you build up empathy for it? So when you finally do see it getting hit and he finally falls down to his death, just some great weight through those shots, but also he just kind of rears up and you see his eye roll up behind him, and in a way you can connect to him a little bit more, seeing that the pain is being inflicted on him, and it could have been done a different way, I guess.
That's another sort of classic monster movie thing where people walk around the head of the giant thing once it's on the ground and sort of go, oh, what have we done? Well, you killed it. Because you always kill it, because it's a monster film.
I choose to believe that the Zillo Beast is not dead, especially if Palpatine wants to replicate it.
You want me to clone the beast?
We haven't got to that yet. I don't know if we'll ever get to that.
But you never say never, who knows? Maybe it's season 7. You know, he'll be a Jedi by then.